Hi again. This is my recording for Forum 7, the initial. I chose to compare the Songs of Innocence and Songs of Experience from Blake. Bear with me, all of the source material is over here and there's a lot. The main difference between the two sets of poems are the Songs of Innocence are extremely optimistic. They mainly deal with youth, children, babies, childhood, spring metaphors, birth, and the songs of experience tend to be darker. Both sets deal a lot with religion, specifically Christianity, a belief in God and heaven, and the songs of experience especially tend to turn more toward the fact that that's what we should be aiming for. That as we grow up, as we have adult cares, things start to weigh heavier, but we shouldn't despair because as long as we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, heaven awaits. I know this is going to be fairly blasphemous, but I kind of hate all these poems. Not all of them, but the Songs of Innocence especially are very kind of simplistic and super sweet. They're just sugary sometimes. Not just the rhymes, but the simplicity of it. Some of them actually read more like nursery rhymes than anything that we would think of as classic poetry. Anything I would think of as classic poetry. From the very first poem, the introduction mentions this very bright light piper going down the valley, piping songs of pleasant glee, meeting this laughing child who asks him to play a song. So we've got the pleasant glee, we've got piped with merry cheer, the happy pipe, the kid wept with joy. He wrote his happy songs, happy, 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 happy. This continues. The next one talks about how sweet it must be to live the shepherd's life, to be out with the sheep all day. And the sheep are in peace because they know that he's watching over them. This is clearly a kind of allegorical statement on Jesus, God watching over, Jesus being called the shepherd, watching over the flock so that they can sleep in ease knowing they're being cared for. It just keeps going. We've got happy skies and merry bells and the joys of youth. We've got the lamb who, when the lamb bleats, the veils rejoice with the sound because it's so beautiful and innocent. There's a little bit of a racist kind of thing going on with the little black boy, and I realized that was a product of the time, and it's not crazy, it's not hateful, it's not intentional, but it does kind of say, hey, once you get to heaven, you'll be as good as the white kid. But even there, you've got the idea that this child's mother loves him and kisses him and takes him on her lap, and she's teaching him about heaven. But the idea is that when he gets to heaven, he has to kind of comfort the little white kid that's there. That's a little, well, that's very disturbing. It's a very jarring kind of idea to throw in the midst of all these light and happy poems. Now it's like, whoa, okay, sorry about your KKK meeting. It's not that bad, and I don't think it was meant to be. I think it was meant to be, hey, you're just as good as we are, but didn't really come off that way. Then we continue on. There's a little bit of darkness that comes with the chimney sweeper. because it actually does talk about this little boy whose mother died when he was young, and his father sold him away to become a chimney sweep. And he's kind of in this sort of Oliver Twist kind of situation with the other chimney sweeps. He's mentioning a lot of little boys together, and one of them is upset, and he's trying to help the child have a positive outlook on things, to say, hey, yeah, this bad thing happened, but look at it this way and you'll be all right. It mentions death specifically, but then also talks about the angel coming and and setting all the children free. One of the boys had had a dream that they had died, and the angel comes and sets them free, and they get to go wash in the river and be clean, and they're in heaven, and they're so happy. So now, even though these children are living this life of abject misery and basically slave labor, they have heaven to look forward to, so it's okay. Every kind of little bit of darkness in the beginning poems in the Songs of Innocence are all colored by this idea that this is all temporary. Don't worry about it. You're being watched over. Even if things are bad here, you're going to go to heaven if you're a good person. If you do what you're supposed to be doing, it's all going to be fine. As it gets closer to the Songs of Experience, they tend to not be quite as light and bright and happy as they were in the beginning. There's still a lot of references to the moon smiling on the night, and then again this idea of there in the poem Night, it talks about the moon watching over, the angels watching over, that there are wolves and animals of prey, that you're kind of okay. But if these animals do break free and get you, if you do actually die, the angels are going to be right there, and they're going to receive you and give you a brand new world. Then we go on to spring. We have the nurse's song. We have all these about the babies, and the children. Then it kind of moves into the idea of kind of a universal mind, that a humanitarian idea, that you can never be fully happy if you know that other people are sad. You can't see another person's grief and not feel that, which is a much more mature kind of idea than has been presented in the others. And that's the final poem in the Songs of Innocence. And it still goes back to the idea that give everything to God and He will help you not feel that grief, to be able to cope. The Songs of Experience in some parts mirror those of Innocence. Some of the poems specifically answer or are a counterpart or a contrast to the Songs of Innocence, having the same kind of titles and that kind of thing. We've gone from, in the beginning, it's the children sitting in the church, and aren't they beautiful and radiant and have their own light about them just because they're children and young, to the Holy Thursday and in the Songs of Experience, where the children are poor and the land is poverty stricken. And for these children, the sun doesn't shine because they're living in abject misery, which is a complete 180 from the first half, but I imagine a whole lot closer to reality for the time period that this was written. There were no child labor laws. There were a lot of children who were forced to work or even thrown into the poorhouses, the workhouses with their parents, because what else were you going to do with these children whose parents you just threw in prison, basically? There's also a difference in some natural descriptions. You've gone from, oh, the sun is beautiful, the moon is shining down on you, to now we've got in Little Girl Lost, the night is frowning down. This little girl is, wandered, and she's been found by these lions, and it's not very clear. It seems like they've carried her off to a cave, which is again maybe a reference to Jesus, but we're not really sure what they're going to do with her. The lion has looked at her and is crying to see her, but they've also taken her clothes away, so they've gotten her back to her most basic natural form, and they've carried her away. In the next one, when she is found, her parents have searched for her for so long that her mother can't even walk anymore, and her father is carrying the mother, and they see the lion and they're scared, but then they're kind of not, because he seems to be kind of cool with them. He talks to them and tells them, come with me, we've got her, she's cool, she's sleeping. And the parents follow. The poem ends with the lines, "To this day they dwell in a lonely dell, nor fear the wolvish howl, nor the lion's growl." I don't think they actually are living in peace with the animals. I think they have all died. I think the lion is another reference to Jesus. C.S. Lewis certainly liked the reference of lion as Jesus. I think they have now, all three, died, gone to heaven. They're now living in a place where humans and animals can coexist without any fear, without any worry. So this is pretty dark. It has a hopeful tone to it, but the idea behind it is really different from the beginning. Now we've got another chimney sweeper poem, which is not nearly the, hey, don't worry about the fact that your hair's all dirty and they had to cut it off, because now you won't care if your hair gets dirty. This is a, my parents have kind of left me here. They're at church and they think that's cool, but I'm kind of left here all by myself. We've got a poem where before we've had poems about flowers, sunflowers, how happy, great, whatever. The Sick Rose poem in the Songs of Experience is about the thorny part of the rose, about be careful, because things can turn against you, even things that you love. If you're not careful of them, they can turn against you. Then all the last poems, we've got, the tiger has to be in anything, that you talk about Blake, you have to talk about the tiger. But again, we've got this image of an animal who's not a lamb, not a bird, some gentle creature. You've got a fierce animal. And the question is, how can the same creator make the lamb that made you? You're fierce. You've got claws. You're terrifying. The language in this poem is also very different than language in the beginning poems that are very light. This is talking about the stars throwing down their spears, so it's spears of light now. It's not radiance and joy. It's weaponry. The stars are watering heaven with their tears. It's not raining. It's not joyful. This is a very dark poem. I think of all of them, it is my favorite. I think there is a reason that this is his most famous poem, his most well-known poem. There is beautiful language in it. And I think it asks a question that most people, especially people of faith, have, or people who have maybe lost their faith because of this question. How do both these things exist from the same maker? How do good and evil exist in the world together? Clearly, this is something that Blake thought about a lot. These poems are so religious in nature. It has to be something that he's considered. He's mentioned the poverty in the world around him. He clearly is aware of the plight of children who are not born to wealth or status and the lives that they have ahead of them. So it has to be something that he's thought of. There's another poem later on called The Garden of Love. Sounds great. You're thinking, oh, okay, cool. Maybe this will be like it. No, it's a cemetery. It's a cemetery. And, there is this line about there's tombstones where flowers should be. Well, that's what happens. People call cemeteries a stone garden for a reason. We're planted. We're not growing from there except to leave, and in his view, leave our bodies and go either direction, depending on how we live. It's very dark, and it's kind of really sad. The farther the poems in the second section go, the darker they get, the more mature they get, the less idealistic they get. There's a lot of language of suffering and awareness, and that's what happens as you gain life experience. As you get older, you lose those blinders, those rose-colored glasses, I guess. I hate that cliche, but that kind of innocent view of the world kind of gets put aside if you're paying attention, and has to. It's sad. It's necessary. It was clearly on his mind a lot. In the end, the two different sets of poems are very different completely. And as much as I don't really like them, mad credit for the difference in tone, the difference in language itself. It almost goes from this nursery rhyme feel to the things you would think about closer to the end of your life. Regrets, doubts, wondering how the world is allowed to work the way it does. How people who are promised such an exultant arrival in heaven have to first live through everything that happens on earth, especially children who have no part in their lives. They have no say in even in their birth. So forget their social standing, their way that their parents make a living, or whether or not they have to work to help support their families. They don't have any say in that. But for Blake, and he specifically talks about London, that was a very kind of typical thing. Most kids didn't get a big, long education and a inheritance that let them be kind of fancy free. So I guess that's enough babbling about this. In the end, they're really, the two sets of poems are really about, metaphorically, childhood and adulthood, specifically the very beginning of your life and the very end of your life, and all of the questions that you ask in between, and all of the things that you learn in between, and how that knowledge, going back to Eve and that stinking tree, what knowledge does to you. That knowledge can destroy part of who you are because you lose that pure innocence forever as soon as you grow up. So that's the end of that, I guess. I will do my replies. Maybe this evening. It's almost 10 o'clock my time, but I'll try at least get a couple of them done before the morning. I have put in my extension request already. I hope that it will go through, just because once I get this done tonight, the only thing I have left is the autobiography and the abstract, and obviously the abstract will come fairly easily after the paper is done. That's all. Thank you very much.